Hey there.
Hey, this is Henry.
Hey, Henry. Aloha, my brother. It's Dave Lawrence at HPR. Good to hear from you.
Oh, hey,
What's going on? You got a good signal? Can you hear me okay?
I sure can, yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. It is Henry Rollins joining us here on member-supported Hawaii Public Radio and All Things Considered. I'm Dave Lawrence, and thrilled he's coming to the Blue Note this time. Is Good to See You tour. I was poking around online to learn a little bit about it, and we're welcoming him now. It's a thrill. He's going to be November 3rd through the 5th there at the Blue Note, Hawaii. A big aloha and mahalo, my brother. Good to talk to you again after about a decade, I think.
So we voulez-voused in the past. Okay.
Yeah, it was a while
That's
back.
cool.
You were doing a few different times you had been doing tours. It's been about that time, right? About that time that you have been in Hawaii. It's been about 10 years?
I think to be on stage, yeah. I was in an episode of Hawaii 5-0.
Correct, that's right.
Years ago.
That's
and
right.
It was, it was work, and I was grateful for it. But the only times I've been to Hawaii otherwise, either to be on stage, and so it's a brief visit. You know, you come in, you do the show, and then you're off to the next place.
Right.
And then one time I was there for a couple of days to do some interviews. I think I interviewed BJ Penn.
Okay, wow.
The MMA fighter.
Right. I get it. Okay, yeah, and I remember that I looked up I saw that you were on Hawaii 5-0. And now when you do these being on stage, as you just referred to it, your performances these days, not music at all, right? It's all going to be, and we'll talk a lot about it, but you're not performing music, or are you at all performing?
No, I haven't done music for many years.
Right.
At one point I woke up, I just sat up in my bed and went, I'm done. It was like, ding, you can leave the university now. And it didn't affect me. It wasn't like some big deal. I just kind of casually called my manager. I thought it through. I went, I guess I'm done. I just didn't think about the lyric as a vehicle that moved me anymore. And rather than sing old songs, which no one would care about anyway, or try to fake it and write songs I didn't mean, which would be a lie, I just bailed. And I called my manager, and he was kind of distressed because he appreciated his commission. But I am loath to hang around in an environment where I'm just not passionate about being there anymore. And so I have a tendency to make a hard out, not like in the middle of a tour or something,
right,
but when something is over, I leave it and I really don't look back. I've been doing shows by myself, like on stage, like what I'll be doing when I'm out there in November. I've been doing shows like that since 1983. And so almost as long as I've been on stage doing music, I've been by myself on stage. And those shows continue to be challenging. And it travels very easily. It's me and a road manager. I bring my own mic. And so that kind of touring, I go like all over the world. And so it's been really, that remains interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's an interesting fact. And the last two times that we had you on a decade ago, those 2 different years that you were here, it was the same deal. You were doing the spoken word thing. And of course, people may be familiar with the KCRW, where he is on the air doing public radio himself there in California. One thing I did not have an idea about, however, and it had been done before we spoke before, maybe it wasn't, maybe I just missed it when I was researching you, but I'm hoping there's some good. And you know, with our show, with All Things Considered, storytelling is a really, really big part of what we do. And so it's always a real gift and a treat for the listeners when we have folks like yourself. So I'm hoping to extract a few of those. So take your time if you can. I had no idea you had produced a record for the late Charles Manson. I read it was called Completion. It was never released. And then there's really a story behind, I guess, how it even first came about, who contacted who, working on it at all with him, and then why. I read a little bit about it, but certainly you telling why it was never released would no doubt be interesting.
Sure. We got SST Records, which was Greg Ginn and Chuck Dukowski's label, and they were the 2 founders of Black Flag. And so I was in Black Flag on the label, but have no ownership or any say. But if you wake up on the floor of SST, you're also an employee. You know, we all just kind of pitched in. And so we were busy working on a Black Flag album called My War. And it was like all hands on deck. We're a tiny little indie company, so everyone was like improvising. Like, okay, you're going to lay out the album cover, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. And so I'm left doing the mail and the newsletter. That was kind of my job at SST. And Charles Manson had a lawyer. His name was Paul Grossack out of Massachusetts, I believe. And he had sent a few independent labels a 60-minute cassette and a 90-minute cassette of Manson's solo vocal guitar acoustic from Vacaville, where he was, which is not a prison. It's like an asylum or a place where you're institutionalized, but it's not prison. So apparently he had a little bit more wiggle room than if he was at like San Quentin.
Okay.
And so he would make these tapes. And so we got a copy of the same two tapes that this label got and that label got. I know for sure Midwestern label, pals of mine, they got a copy. And so someone said, okay, who's going to listen to the Manson tapes? I go, well, I got my hands not as full as all of you. I'll listen to them. And it was just like this utilitarian thing of like, oh yeah, that guy. You know, I read that book when I was 14. And so I got the tapes back to this place I was living in, and I listened to them. Like, I'll put them on. And I was surprised at how, like, he obviously knew where to put the microphone,
right.
like, you know, the whatever he's recording on, because the vocal and guitar mix was really clear. Like, you can really hear the guitar, you can hear what the guy's saying, and it you know, I don't approve of anything he did, but this music, it wasn't bad. And so the next day, they're like, well, I'm like, it's not bad. And the tape, I can hear some edits where you can fade out of this idea, and he just kind of rambles along. But there's an album. There's like 35, 37 minutes of music, absolutely. And they said, you think it's any good? I go, I think it's totally compelling. And, you know, it's your label. And they said, well, let's do it. And that, you know, they got together with, I guess, Manson's lawyer. None of this is up to me. And so I was told to write a letter to Manson, like, here's his address,
wow,
and let him know that you're working on this thing. So, dear Mr. Manson, and I wrote him this letter. Hey, my name's Henry. I'm in this band, and I'm going to be editing these two cassettes, and I've got these in points and these out points, and I've made my notes, and I think I've got it. And he wrote me back, like, I go to my little P.O. box in Redondo Beach, California, and everyone behind the counter, who knows me, they're scowling at me.
No.
Okay, what have I done? No. And it's because
he wrote you back.
I have a letter from Charles Manson in my P.O. box, and in the S in Manson, he does this. He draws it into a swastika.
Oh,
and
wow.
So there's like this big pen swastika on the side of the letter. I'm like, okay, and that's where the scowls come from.
I get
you know,
it.
They know who it is, and why is he writing, you know, your favorite hometown boy? And so he said, hey, man, you know, I've seen you on MTV, you know, cool. And he started writing me, and I would write him back like, well, I'm leaving on tour, you know, and I kept all the mail. And eventually, I take these cassettes and I take the edit points to a little studio called Radio Tokyo, which is no longer with us, but it's super cheap. And I bounce the cassettes onto the 1/4-inch tape, and I make the edits. I have everything written down. It's not that big a deal. You know, it's like totally home set up. And we end up with like side A and side B, these two pancakes of tape. And I go, okay, done. And in a thing Manson wrote me once, he wrote this poem called Completion. And it's like really interesting bit of writing. And like, well, let's just call the album that. And I wrote him this idea, and he said, okay. And so we take the tapes. I take them to John Golden at K-Disc in Los Angeles. Now his son is a very famous mastering engineer, but I'm an old guy, so I worked with the original John Golden. And a lot of Black Flag and SST records were done with John Golden. A, he's great. B, he's cheap. And so I somehow get into Hollywood. I take these tapes in, and Mr. Golden is a consummate professional. And he's just like, you know, always smiling. Okay, so what are we doing today? And I go, Charles Manson. And he just freezes. And then he kind of, you know, recovers. Well, okay, let's get this up on the. He just goes right to work. and we mastered this record, and it turns into 6 test pressings, and it's probably a pretty rare record at this point. 5 or 6 test pressings, 5 for sure, and somehow word gets out that we're going to do this record, and the LA Times gets hold of it, and they write this whole thing, and then suddenly we are getting the scariest death threats.
Oh, wow.
Like, here's the home address of your bass player, and she was wearing red sweatpants yesterday, and we'll kill you if you put this out. And it's not my call. It's Greg and Chuck. It's their label. And they called it and said, we're not doing it. And I think it was because the bass player in the band got threatened, and that was like a bridge too far for them. And, it's not my label. It's not my decision. I was just kind of this guy who's thrown into the job. And so the record never went further. And I wrote Manson and said, look, here's what happened. And it's kind of a tricky thing to explain. I'm on the label, I work the label, but I don't run the label. So I did the work, but it's not my decision. And it's kind of hard to get that through to a guy who's pretty crazy.
Right.
He's nuts. He's also a complete manipulative con man. And like he's always working you. So he wrote back, well, you're ripping me off, and the Beach Boys ripped me off, and the Grateful Dead ripped me off, and I hate you. And I'm like, well, okay, man.
Wow.
And that was it. And so the record, I think it got bootlegged. There's cassettes rolling around. And other labels had those 2 cassettes. And so those tapes were floating around the tape trader world,
right,
probably to this day, but it's probably now like an MP3. But those every band had those recordings because everyone's trading tapes in those days. It was kind of like the analog internet.
Right.
And,
it was a novelty.
That was, yeah. And I kept all the mail he sent me, and he sent me some drawings.
Never spoke to him.
And it was just, say what?
You never spoke to him?
No, I never met the guy. It was purely just a paper correspondence that lasted a while. And then it ended with him being very angry at me,
right,
and I guess SST, but, he didn't say anything about that. He just told me that I was a liar and that I had ripped him off. And I was like, well, no, it's these death threats. I mean, it's not my call. And I don't know if I was clear enough to him or if he wanted to hear that. But in any case, he, I guess, didn't like me. And the thing kind of ended.
Never wrote you again? He never wrote you again?
Years ago, I saw that record as a CDR, like somewhere on the internet. So someone must have got a hold of the final edit.
You never heard from him again after that final correspondence where he was upset?
No, he just, he just basically told me where to go, and that was it. And, I'm not going to keep writing him like, oh, come on, Chuck.
Right.
But it was an interesting, chapter.
What year was that?
And he would write me pretty often. And every time I knew I'd get mail from him because I would just get these burning stares from the people behind the counter at the P.O. box. And, like, they did not like that guy. And every time I look at, one of them, they're just giving me the eye. I'm like, well, I must have incoming mail today.
Right. You never explained to them? You never said, hey, look, I'm not, I'm just maybe doing a record with the guy. No,
I never said a word. I just went and got my mail and limped back to my pad. But it was, for a young guy, I was like 23 or something like that, 22. It was just a fascinating bit of correspondence because, he's such he's an odd figure in American cultural history. I mean, you can basically say, well, who ended the flower generation? Who kind of ended peace and love in California? Like one guy and his followers. And when this guy is writing you a letter, it's heavy.
Especially after the Beach Boys
I'm
thing.
one of those people, I think everything on paper is interesting. And so I kept all of it. I kept all of the correspondence. Not that, it's like, hey, look at this. I just I kept a lot of mail from people, I still do. I just think human handwriting is just fascinating because you have to be there and be alive to do it. And so it's a real mortal timestamp,
No, totally. And he had already had that Beach Boys connection, which was quite scary when you talk about. I mean, he really already had tried to work that manipulation many, many years ago with Melcher and with I forget who in the Beach Boys, but he came very close to.
Well, he mainly hooked up with the drummer.
Okay.
Because the drummer was the handsome one, and he was the one with the Dennis. He was the one with all the girls. And so that's what I think attracted Manson. Because he's looking for women to manipulate and women to, be with, whatever. But I think that was the main connection. And I am willing to bet that Manson grossly overstated how much it meant to the Beach Boys. I think maybe they were fascinated by this odd guy. I mean, I remember Paul Rothschild, amazing producer. He produced the Doors album.
Yeah.
Except for L.A. Woman. He basically walked out of that session saying, I can't produce Jim's voice because I just won't put my name on this record. But he's the guy who, gave you Strange Days and all of that. And I met him one time, a couple of times actually. And I was mastering a Rollins band record down the hall from the Doors, who were remastering everything for CD. And I had met Manzarek a few times, and Rothschild came into my little booth where I'm mastering my Rollins band record. And he goes, what are you doing, man? I said, well, this is our first band record. It's like 1987. He goes, well, can I listen? I go, you want to listen?
Wow.
He's like, yeah. He's like really open-minded. And so we get to talking. And, the guy's got stories like, all day.
Yeah.
Guys like that, they've seen everything.
Yeah.
And so he said, one time I'm in my office, like Electra or wherever he is. And, who knows? These people are always at a bunch of different places. And wherever he is, he's somewhere in L.A., he's working, A&R guy or something, or just a big shot producer. He goes, and Charles Manson walks into my office and with a guitar and says, hey, I'd like to play some of my songs for you. I'm like, okay, this scruffy guy. So he's like, okay, kid, let it rip. And I go, and? He goes, oh, he sucked. I listened to the songs and kicked him out of my office. And it's just the way he was just kind of done, he didn't acknowledge any of the horrible notoriety. He was just like, the guy had no talent, so I told him to take a powder. It was just, just funny. It's like, Napoleon came over and I told him he owed me $40 and kicked him out.
Yeah.
But it was just an odd, living in Hollywood and Los Angeles, you would just, you'd come back from an evening and just like, wow, that was surreal. Because you've hung out with Sky Saxon and this guy and, two people from this band and all in one night.
Yeah. No, it's that lifestyle for sure. It's Dennis Wilson. So you were right. That's who the Wilson brother that he got the closest to. Well, before we let you go, and you're just such a great storyteller. It's really a gift for the audience. I'm sure people will really appreciate it. Maybe
I got a million of them.
I know. Well, maybe we'll even get a few contributions based on the quality of this session. I only got to see you live one time, and I'm just imagining that because it was such a historic sort of event, you may have a story or two to share with folks, and I'll briefly set the stage, and hopefully you have something to add to it. It was Saugerties, New York. It was Woodstock, 1994. There were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. I happened to be in that field. One massive set from you, but from the moment that either you were offered the gig, got there, backstage, anything interesting besides being on the biggest stage I've ever seen, the loudest PA I've ever experienced. What can you talk about of you playing at Woodstock?
We played the night before in Detroit, and we had to abandon all of our transportation and just move via airplane to get to New York because it's a daytime show. So we're just, it was like no sleep. And so we land, we get wherever the nearest airport is, we're picked up, and then us and our gear are put onto a boat. No, sorry, I'm getting this wrong. I'm sorry. We get to some area, and our road crew is allowed to drive the gear to the site. We, the band, are going to go by helicopter. And like, we were in a little band. I mean, maybe some rock star choppers around, but not us. And we get, and who's the great comedian from the show Cheers? Christy Alley? Yeah.
Okay.
So she was about to get in this helicopter, and here comes the Rollins band. And they go, "We're so sorry, Ms. Alley, but this is a band, and they're priority." And she's like, "Well, I'm," and they went, "Well, sorry." And she was not happy. And so we just kind of went, "Well, excuse us." And we hopped into this helicopter. And I'm sure these helicopter pilots, who are basically like a taxi from this pad to wherever the landing site at Woodstock is, back and forth all day. And I'm sure every single band who got in that helicopter that day, reverted to Apocalypse Now. And so we're all in the back of this chopper. And it was, and the pilot's like rolling his eyes, like, "Oh, I hate this job." And you take this thrilling, at least 2.5-minute chopper ride, if that. And he took us over the audience, which is just being in a helicopter. I've been in a bunch of them since, but it was just wild. You're just kind of strapped in and looking out this window. It's not like flying in a plane. And we're flying over the heads of everyone. It was like surreal. And we go out and play. And as soon as we hit stage, it starts raining.
Right.
Like it's like we brought the rain. It's like, the first downbeat and the sky cracks open. And we play. I'll never forget, it's a bunch of hot bodies, like 300,000 people, and everyone's moving, and they're being rained on. But the human body heat is such that people, the rain is evaporating off of them, and it forms a visible cloud over the audience. And I have photos of this show. You can see the cloud. I'm not tripping. It's like, and the wind would shift, and it would go from the audience to the stage, and it would be like inhaling hundreds of thousands of armpits. Just like the smell of Homo sapiens. And you're like, whoa! And it's inescapable because there's no other air to breathe. So you're like, well, okay. And so the air would be at your back going forward, and it would be kind of cool. And then the air would shift, and suddenly it's like 100 degrees of like youthful body heat, plus the smell of like shampoo, perspiration, and it was just this, it smelled, the heat would vary on stage which way the wind was blowing because there's so many people. And if you're in a band like The Who or, some big arena band, you probably have like 300 stories like this. But, this is a gig like Woodstock is, there's only been one of those in my life.
Right. And
it was just this 45, 60-minute set, whatever it was, of just kind of reacting to, okay, the wind's coming this way, and that's what that smells like. And look at all the stage. And I just would run around on the stage, and it just, like you said, it just never ended.
It was huge. And the sound that came off of that PA, man, they invested in it. Not only
they did it right. And so we finished our set, and I had to do some press, and we were on tour, and so we eventually, when we get ourselves together, we've got to go. And so the road crew bundled all the gear together. I was the one stuck out there doing press. And so when I finished the press, we got to go. And so that's when the gear was put on, and us. We were put onto some ferry, and we're boated out of there to where we met a vehicle. And then eventually we met up with our bus, like later that night, because it was like overnighting from Michigan. And the tour resumed. And I'd have to go find my tour schedule to figure out where we were the next night. But I'm fairly sure we were on stage just back to the normal 600 people in front of us the next night in some low-ceilinged club, just back to our normal existence. So it was just like this weird pop-out in our existence. And we started doing more summer festival dates in Europe, where we're never a big band on those scenes. Like the Bowie's going to headline at 7 p.m. So you're on at like 10 a.m. with no one in front of you but security guards and 2 lost seagulls. But we got used to playing on some big stages in front of some pretty big audiences because of the European festival circuit,
right,
which we found ourselves on pretty regularly from 1992 or 4 onwards. And those festivals, as you know, they go all over the world. When Woodstock was a standout show, and eventually I was a New Yorker. I was living in New York with my bandmates. We're working on a record. And there's a gym I'm going to all the time in the Lower East Side. And one day I walk in there, and there's Michael Lang, the guy who kind of invented Woodstock. And I've seen the Woodstock movie a bunch of times as I was younger, and the way to see Jimi Hendrix. And so I'm like, whoa. And I recognized him because he's Michael Lang, and he recognized me because I was at Woodstock. And I said, Michael Lang. He's like, yeah, Rollins fan, right? I go, yeah. You work out here? Like, yeah. You work out here? Yeah. He's still a small place. And I had this really interesting conversation with the guy who gave you Woodstock, and it was just one of those New York moments where you walk down the street and Joey Ramone walks by on his way to the deli. That's New York City, and I got to thank him for letting us be on the bill, and we had an amazing time. And every once in a while, someone will tell me, of all people, Sammy Hagar came up to me one night and they said, "Man, I saw you at Woodstock." I'm like, okay.
That is, and did you meet Michael? I remember seeing him. That's great. You told that Michael stories. I remember seeing his face on the giant screens and feeling like a connection to the original one when you saw that distinctive afro of hair. Had you seen him or met him at the event in '94?
Oh, no.
Wow. Even cooler.
We hardly met anyone there. The backstage area, there's so many people,
sure,
bands, road crew,
yep,
catering, that no one talks to you except the person who goes, okay, we're going to walk the stage in 4 minutes. Is everyone ready?
Yep.
And you're like, yeah. And you're being taken through a theme park.
Yeah.
And then, you're let through a gate and they go, okay, this guy's going to take you to there. And then this guy's going to take you up the stairs to the stage. Are you ready? And you're like, yeah, I guess. I mean, it's just, they have to control so many humans. You just have to kind of shut up and be led around. And after the show, it's not like there's a huge scene backstage, and whatever was going on, I had to do press. And so maybe my bandmates got to hang out with some people in a celebratory mood.
Right.
But I was in some press tent doing press with whoever. I was, being led around and told who to talk to. And so I don't know what my bandmates got up to, and if they told me, I've long forgotten. But a friend of mine, old Black Flag road manager, he was at this show with us, and he was just walking around with his camera in our little area, and he was taking pictures like members of Aerosmith,
yeah,
and all these people. And I think Nash of Crosby, Stills, and Nash, he saw us, and he was on TV soon after Woodstock, and he said a lot of really nice things about the band, which I thought was really, he didn't have to do that. And they go who did you like at Woodstock? He's, man, I like the Rollins band. That was really cool. We're like, whoa, okay. Because if you're in a band like mine, you're not used to getting complimented much. It's usually derogatory.
Yeah.
You guys are the worst. But, someone of that magnitude, you're like, well, damn, okay.
No, that's huge.
That was right up there when the time Tom Waits said nice things about us. That was also a big deal for us.
That's a good, well, the Graham Nash is a great one to sort of wrap it on because he's a Hawaii cat. He actually has a place over on Kauai, and the Michael Lang. What a great way to have that experience come full circle years later. It's Henry Rollins.
Yeah.
He's gonna be doing a lot of heavy duty storytelling at the Blue Note Hawaii, and we just took a little bit. He's got so many stories to share, and it's just good to see you tour November 3rd through the 5th. At the Blue Note Hawaii. And Henry, really appreciate you being on All Things Considered, and we hope you had fun getting to talk with us today.
No, absolutely. Thanks for the time, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone out there.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we appreciate it. Great storytelling, my man. High fives, and hopefully we'll get to say hi. Do you say hi to people now that the pandemic has happened, or are you done with meet and greets and stuff?
No, I did. I just finished 84 shows. 84 shows into the year, and there was a meet and greet at every single one of them.
Nice.
And so, and I'm still here, and we do that wherever we're able to do it. And so, no, I don't run away from people, but I'm careful. It's not like I'm 23 anymore.
Right on, bro.
And so I'm careful because I can't get sick on tour. I don't want to get sick anyway, but
sure.
Yeah, with a show a night, I can't be pushing it. And so I'm very careful of masking and distancing. And if some people give me a weird look because I'm wearing a mask, well, bite me. I'm just trying to be safe. But no, I talk to people after the show, but I am careful just because, I can't be missing shows because I got sick. I mean, one guy in a band gets COVID, and the whole tour goes home.
Right.
And you have to remember, performer types like me and thousands of others, we've been waiting for 3 years to get back out on the road.
Yep.
And so this year, being back on tour, my road manager and I, we've been traveling together for like 14 years. We felt like we won the lottery getting back to the audience. We miss them. And so I'm very careful out there because I have shows till next July, and so I can't miss shows. So I like to meet the audience, absolutely. I just got to be careful.
Well, we're stoked, and we'll say hi if we get a chance. But either way, no, we're really grateful for you being on the show. That's the most important thing. And please stay safe, my brother.
I will, and I'll see you in a while.
Take care. Be safe, Henry. Aloha, man.
Okay, bye.
Take care.